Pictures from Nabatea are pretty extraordinary. A massive simultaneous airstrike. Local residents say at least 9 hitting the city simultaneously, and we've seen pictures of these great massive plumes of smoke going across from outside the city right across it. Remember, Nabatea is one of many, many cities across Lebanon, but particularly in the south, that is technically under an Israeli evacuation order. So a lot of residents have left. Some haven't or have been unable to do so. Some people have fled from other parts of the south to Nabatea, and it seems that Mayor Ahmed Kahil, who locals say had chosen to stay behind to be able to help them to deal with the humanitarian needs there, and apparently they say there was a meeting going on in the town hall about those needs when the strikes came and hit the municipality hall directly, which was reduced to rubble. So he's one of at least 6 who died in that airstrike.
You know, talking to Judge Joe Brown on a live about a month or so ago, he brought something to the table, and he was like, she's suffering from early Alzheimer's and alcoholism. And I'm like, what do you mean? He was like, you notice there's certain things and characteristics. Her Alzheimer's, because she cannot string coherent sentences together, that's where the awkward cackling comes after the fact. And the drinking makes it worse, and it helps her cope. And I started looking at older footage of her, and she did not speak like that. She was much more articulate, much more robust in her speech. And I then thought, of course they want her to be up next, because Biden is at the end stages of the Alzheimer's. So we could run her if we get her through. You know, we're going to quarterback sneak her in, and we could just keep quarterback sneaking.
You guys are not new, and you know that when we began this independent endeavor, I basically said that reading the book Chaos was required reading. It was all about the MKUltra program. It was all about the Charles Manson murders that actually the CIA was involved in. Like Charles Manson, we were supposed to believe he was this big scary guy who was behind all of these murders in Hollywood, when in reality the CIA had him as he was a Fed. They turned him while he was in prison. Obviously, we're allowing him to give out all of this LSD to brainwash these women. I mean, just an incredible story that really makes you confront what your government is capable of. And so when I read this guy and he's saying that her mother was a part of the MKUltra program, that she was essentially experimenting on monkeys, it kind of made things fit for me in a way, just like it passed the sniff test, because I know, and we're not going to get into it in this episode, that the civil rights movement was not a natural movement. It was a movement that was being done by people that had an interest in changing the dynamics in America. Black Americans were essentially just the tools. Obviously, we know that after the civil rights movement, some of the things that were installed were meant to actually destroy the black community. When you get into LBJ, who was horrifically racist. I mean, so much happened in the 60s, shooting of JFK, that we still don't have answers for, but we kind of know who shot JFK and who was behind the shooting of JFK. Anyways, this guy is saying that her mother was a part of that, and that makes sense to me because we know that Shamala Goplin, just don't know if I'm saying her name right, incredibly intelligent scientist, and yet spent so much time at these protests, you know, just intertwining herself in the civil rights movement. Not the average thing that somebody who's like experimenting on baboons is like, okay, get a free weekend, I want to go down to a protest, unless you're being told to sort of infiltrate and make yourself a part of these protests. So I thought, okay, this is plausible, but also not really relevant, right? Because it's not going to shape the election. You can't exactly blame Kamala for the crimes of her mother. Also, if her mother worked for the government and they told her to experiment on monkeys, okay, what are you going to do? But it was something else that was buried within this article that caught my eye. Okay. Now, before I tell you what that was, the first thing that you're thinking is, Candace, how do you know that this Japanese guy wasn't just some crazy person? That's what my husband said. Fair point. Obviously, you get tons of emails. This could be a total schizophrenic guy who's just putting together a storyline and is writing all crazy. So I said, let me just do a little bit of research into this guy. And there's actually tons of things available about him, and there's actually a video of him speaking about something that has nothing to do with Kamala. So I want to give you guys the opportunity to practice your own discernment. I'm a big believer in believing your own eyes and believing your own ears, right? So I'm going to show you a video of the author of that article. I'm telling you, his name is Yoichi Shimatsu. And here is a video of him. We're just going to They fawned over her, but they were, I will say the audience was noticeably not enthused by her when she gave a non-answer regarding reparations. Now, you know, that's the big thing. Are you going to executively sign off on reparations for Black Americans? Because they always do the song and dance for Black Americans. I get in office, You're going to get paid because you were not slaves and we were not slave owners, but everyone's going to have to pay for what happened a long time ago. It's completely nonsensical. Again, it's just meant to be a bait. And then as soon as they get into office, they don't do anything that they promised. It's all about just like emotionally engineering Black Americans to constantly think Democrats are their saviors. It's been like 70 years of this nonsense, and they've never delivered on a single promise. But whatever, we still got to pretend they're going to, because she says that she's in these streets a lot. Anyways, here she is when somebody pushes her, wondering if she's going to sign an executive order on reparations. Take a listen.
Jackson Lee's signature bill, one of a few, was H.R. 40, which would create a commission to study the history of U.S. slavery and study the issue of reparations. Would you, as president, take executive action to create this commission, or do you believe that it should happen in Congress?
Well, first of all, as you mentioned, Sheila Jackson Lee, she was an extraordinary leader who we just recently lost, and she was a friend and a real champion for so many issues. So I feel compelled to say that about her. On the issue of what we need to do going forward, look, first of all, we just need to speak truth about history, in spite of the fact that some people who try and erase history and try and teach our children otherwise. We need to speak truth about the generational impact of our history, in terms of the generational impact of slavery, the generational impact of redlining, of Jim Crow law. I could go on and on and on. These are facts that have had impact. And we need to speak truth about it. And we need to speak truth about it in a way that is about deriving solutions. And frankly, I think that we, and part of that is studying it to figure out exactly what we need to do. But part of what we can do right now is, for example, what I'm talking about in terms of building an opportunity economy, which is addressing explicitly the obstacles that historically and currently exist and dealing with them: student loan debt, medical debt, bias in home appraisals. What we need to do in terms of dealing with an issue that I have championed for years, Black maternal mortality, which is the fact that Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in connection with childbirth than other women. And we know that the reasons for that include disparities that pre-exist her pregnancy, including disparities that exist in the system during her pregnancy. So all of those things must be addressed.
Okay, that wasn't even like a DC dip and twirl. That was like a DC dip, twirl, Cotton Eye Joe, do the splits, a couple of somersaults. I mean, she didn't answer the question at all. It was a yes or no question. Like, hey, are you going to use your office to sign an executive order to give us those reparations that you've been speaking out for a very long time? And I mean, this woman just went everywhere. First we need to talk about the history. We need to talk about the facts. And the facts are, there's a lot of history. And the history is that there are a lot of facts. And the facts are that Black Americans have been... childbirth. Did I mention childbirth? Did I mention everything but the reparations question that you just asked me? Because if you give me 5 more minutes, I'm going to make sure that I mention everything except for the answer to the question that you just asked me. But I'm going to nod like this and keep saying facts and keep saying truth. Did I mention truth? And I'm going to keep saying history. And hopefully you will just applaud whatever it is that I say, because I would like to remind you that I am darker than Donald J. Trump, and that should be all that matters. Give me your vote. That's Kamala Harris in a nutshell.
Tonight, there are calls for justice after the release of video showing Phoenix police officers beating and tasing a Black man. CBS's Chris Van Cleve has the video and a warning. It may be difficult to watch.
Hand behind your back! This Phoenix police body camera video is sparking outrage from civil rights and disability advocates. The video captures the August arrest of Tyrone McAlpin, a deaf man with cerebral palsy.
Hey, buddy, stop where you're at.
Immediately upon pulling up, Officer Benjamin Harris jumps out of his vehicle and begins punching McAlpin as Officer Kyle Sue rushes over. McAlpin is punched at least 10 times and repeatedly tased. He now faces 3 felony charges for allegedly assaulting the officers
They also bit me.
and resisting arrest.
It's really unconscionable when you see what happened in that video.
Jesse Showalter is McAlpin's civil attorney.
Tyrone is just trying to avoid being hurt by an aggressive, out-of-control police officer. He can't hear any of the commands, and the officers never do anything to de-escalate the situation.
It started when officers were called to a nearby convenience store about a white man who was allegedly loitering. That man claimed he was assaulted and his cell phone stolen.
Alleging he assaulted you, do you want him to go to jail? Yes.
He hadn't done anything wrong. So all the force that they used is excessive, unnecessary, and unreasonable.
This incident came just 2 months after a damning Department of Justice report found Phoenix police engaged in a pattern of discrimination and excessive force.
All of this postdates the DOJ report, runs counter to everything the city of Phoenix claims that it's doing.
McAlpin spent 24 days in jail before making bond. He's pleaded not guilty. Those officers didn't learn he was deaf until after his arrest, and they remain on the job as Phoenix police and now the county's top prosecutor are reviewing what happened in this parking lot. Nora?
Chris Van Cleve, thank you.